I'd lost everything, or so I thought. But in the quiet, amid the chaos and betrayal, a slow, inevitable plan began to take shape. A methodical reclaiming of what was mine. I returned to the house just past 6 in the morning. The sky still a pale gray over Kingsville, North Carolina. My briefcase felt heavier than usual, weighed down by failed investor meetings and unanswered emails, a tangible reminder of the week's disappointments. The front door creaked as I stepped inside, expecting the familiar hum of a television, the faint smell of coffee, the soft chaos of our shared life. Instead, the apartment was unnervingly silent. I found Allison in the living room, her movements deliberate as she folded clothes into a suitcase, each motion precise and purposeful. She did not look up, her back straight, her hands moving as if following a routine she had practiced countless times in private. The sight struck me with a cold, immediate clarity. She was leaving. The idea had never been spoken, never hinted at, and yet here it was unfolding in front of me. I stood frozen, gripping my briefcase tighter, my thoughts scattering between disbelief and disbelief again. Every photo on the walls, every book on the shelves, every piece of furniture that once felt intimate and familiar now seemed alien, a silent witness to the fracture between us. The apartment's corners, once comforting, felt hollow, echoing my heartbeat in the quiet. The morning light spilled across the hardwood floors in thin, unforgiving lines, highlighting the emptiness where life had once been shared. The weight of betrayal pressed against my chest, a slow, insidious ache that spread through my limbs. I felt the shock of being abandoned mingled with helplessness and the raw sting of realization that nothing in this space would ever feel the same again. Amid the chaos of my mind, a subtle awareness began to settle, almost imperceptible, that the world I had known was irrevocably altered. Time seemed to slow as I watched her zip the suitcase close, the soft click of the metal slider cutting through the silence like a final punctuation. I remained rooted to the spot, observing the rhythm of her movements, the way the morning light touched her hair, the way the air in the room carried the scent of unfolding change. The realization sank in with a quiet certainty. The life we had built together was no longer mine to inhabit. I stood there, alone, surrounded by the remnants of shared memories, each object a reminder of a chapter that had ended without warning. In that stillness, in the weight of absence, I felt the first tremors of understanding that everything had shifted, and there would be no going back to the world as I had known it. I moved from one temporary apartment to another, each space smaller, colder, and less familiar than the last. The couches of friends offered little comfort, more a place to collapse than to rest, and the walls echoed with the emptiness of a life unraveling. The office, once alive with conversation and the constant hum of creation, had become a hollow shell. Desks sat abandoned, monitors unplugged, whiteboards erased. Every day I woke with the weight of failing deadlines pressing down, the coffee I poured in the kitchen tasting bitter against the taste of lost opportunity. Calls to investors ended in polite refusals, polite dismissals, polite avoidance. Each email in the inbox was a new reminder of rejection. Another rejection added to the pile of previous failures, the cursor blinking at me like a mocking metronome. I watched my employees drift away, one by one, the ones who had believed in the vision, the ones who had laughed at the late nights and stayed when promises were empty, slipping quietly through my fingers. Partners who once shook hands with smiles now responded only with distance, their emails curt, their attention elsewhere. The startup that had once felt like a rocket waiting to launch now felt like a sinking ship, each wave of obstacles heavier than the last. Nights were the worst. Alone in rented spaces, I would sit by the window, watching the rain smear the city into muted colors, listening to the soft patter on the asphalt, letting it mirror the slow erosion of control in my life. The silence pressed down, thick and tangible, and my thoughts became a restless tide, alternating between shame, rage, and an aching helplessness. I imagined the faces of clients lost, of opportunities squandered, of promises unkept, and it all settled on my shoulders like lead. Even small victories were fleeting, barely registering before another failure emerged to fill the void. The routine became a loop of survival rather than progress, each day a mirror of the one before, defined by exhaustion, fear, and the relentless pressure of maintaining what little remained. I was present but not grounded, moving through a life stripped to essentials, the remnants of ambition and pride the only guides through a fog of uncertainty. In the quiet of these rented rooms, watching the world through rain-streaked windows, the internal chaos felt almost physical, my chest tight, my hands restless, my mind a looping echo of everything I had lost and everything I feared I would never regain. I arrived at Kate's apartment carrying the remnants of a life that felt fractured beyond repair, a duffel bag heavy with clothes and heavier still with the weight of my own despair. The building was modest, an aging brick structure tucked into a quiet street in downtown Charleston, South Carolina, 2024. The small hallway led to a door that opened onto a space unlike any I had inhabited in months. The apartment smelled of coffee and fresh bread, a warm, domestic scent that filled the corners and softened the edges of my anxiety. Sunlight filtered through narrow windows, dust motes drifting lazily in the air. And the quiet hum of the neighborhood outside was gentle, unhurried, inviting me to pause. Kate had prepared the place with subtle care, leaving a neatly folded blanket on the couch and a small pile of dishes in the kitchen, a quiet acknowledgement that my presence mattered and that I was welcome. The days settled into a rhythm that was foreign and comforting at once. Mornings began with the scent of coffee brewing, steam curling from mugs in small, precise movements, a ritual that reminded me that some things could still be simple, still be reliable. We walked through the tree-lined streets nearby, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, and the soft chatter of passers-by a backdrop to my slow, deliberate reconnection with the world. Each small act of ordinary life, preparing meals, washing dishes, organizing notes for investor calls, became a tether, a quiet support that countered the chaos that had defined my weeks. I returned to the remnants of my startup with cautious energy, unpacking files, opening emails I had avoided, reconstructing spreadsheets, each tiny win a small victory that tasted sweeter for the struggle it followed. Confidence crept in incrementally, like sunlight moving across the walls, unnoticed, until the room was fully lit. I began to recognize the strength that had been buried under failure and fear, a steady pulse of responsibility and capability that demanded attention. As days blurred together, I realized that the quiet consistency of Kate's presence, the stability of routines and shared moments, had allowed me to reclaim fragments of myself that I had believed lost. The internal dialogue shifted subtly, from despair and helplessness to measured reflection, acknowledgement of capability, and the slow rebuilding of trust in my own judgment. Each morning I drank coffee with a little more focus. Each evening I planned the next day with a faint but growing sense of purpose. In the quiet warmth of Kate's apartment, surrounded by simple acts of care and the soft rhythm of everyday life, I began to feel anchored again, able to confront the challenges of work, to take responsibility for the remnants of my company, and to see that survival was not only possible but a prelude to renewal. I spent long hours in Kate's small living room, papers spread across the coffee table, the glow of the laptop screen reflecting my own tension back at me. Every email I opened, every ledger I examined, revealed the slow, deliberate erosion of what I had built. My former partner had siphoned clients quietly, rerouted invoices, duplicated contracts under shell companies. Each piece of evidence added weight to the story that had already begun to form in my mind, a story of betrayal that required precision and patience rather than anger. With my lawyer, Harper, we organized every document, every digital trail, making sure nothing could be dismissed or overlooked. The hours bled into nights, the air thick with the scent of takeout and stale coffee, punctuated by the rhythmic clack of keyboard keys as we cataloged emails, receipts, and internal notes. I rehearsed every sequence in my head, imagining the courtroom, the judge, the sterile lighting, the way each detail would need to land. When the day of the hearing arrived, I walked into the courthouse with a careful steadiness, the cool marble beneath my shoes grounding me. The room was quiet, each movement magnified, every shuffled paper and whispered adjustment carrying weight. I watched my former partner sit across from me, composed in a tailored suit, attempting to project innocence while the evidence we had gathered loomed over him silently. My focus narrowed to the facts, the impact of his actions on employees, clients, and the future of the company, refusing to let any personal resentment cloud my strategy. I presented the findings methodically, every point calculated, every argument anchored in documentation and irrefutable evidence. The judge absorbed the details, weighing each account with meticulous care, the silence of the courtroom punctuating the gravity of what was at stake. As the verdict was delivered, recognizing the violations, imposing penalties and sanctions, I felt a steady sense of resolution settle over me. There was no triumph in shouting, no exhilaration in revenge. The satisfaction came in the quiet acknowledgement that justice had been served, that accountability had been established, that the wrongs had been recognized and addressed. I left the courtroom with a calm awareness, carrying the knowledge that fairness had been restored, that I had navigated the storm with clarity and composure, and that the foundation was secure to rebuild on my own terms. I woke to the soft light of early morning filtering through the blinds, the smell of coffee drifting from the small kitchen where Kate had already started her routine. The apartment felt alive with subtle warmth, the quiet hum of daily life replacing the emptiness I had carried for months. I moved through my mornings with purpose, setting up my laptop on the kitchen table, reviewing emails, drafting proposals, and plotting the recovery of the company in measured steps. Each new client who agreed to work with us, each contract signed, felt like a small victory, a reaffirmation that persistence and attention to detail could restore what had been lost. The office, once hollow and neglected, slowly regained its rhythm. Monitors flickered to life, phones rang with inquiries, and the hum of conversation returned as employees who had stayed or returned reoccupied their desks. Meetings with partners, brainstorming sessions, and strategy reviews filled the hours, but they no longer felt like burdens. They were the work of rebuilding and reclaiming, each task reinforcing a sense of competence I had feared gone. Outside the office, I found balance in simple routines. Walking through the park near Kate's apartment, watching leaves drift across the paths, listening to the subtle rhythms of the city as it woke and moved around me. These moments grounded me, a reminder that life continued beyond spreadsheets and contracts. At home, the quiet companionship with Kate became a source of steady support. Her presence was not dramatic or demanding. It was a calm, consistent anchor. I noticed small gestures, the way she remembered details I had overlooked, the way she waited without judgment, the way our lives intertwined seamlessly in the ordinary acts of living. Over time, I came to understand that love was not always defined by passion or intensity, but by reliability, attentiveness, and the willingness to stand beside someone without needing to fix everything for them. Each evening, after work was done, I would sit across from her at the small dining table, sharing a simple meal, reflecting on the day, appreciating the quiet constancy that had become the foundation of our shared life. The company grew steadily, our client list expanding, profits stabilizing, and the office once again thrummed with purpose and energy. And within this renewed professional world, our personal lives grew in tandem, a measured, deliberate intimacy that provided clarity and calm. I learned to value the trust and presence that Kate offered, a love built not on spectacle but on consistency, a quiet support that made the ordinary feel extraordinary, and a steady foundation on which I could finally rebuild a life that was mine, whole and enduring. I watched her standing on the doorstep, the autumn light catching her hair, the expression on her face weighted with regret and unspoken pleas. I felt none of the old panic or desperation, only a calm clarity that had taken months of solitude, struggle, and quiet reflection to achieve. The past, with all its betrayals, failures, and losses, had settled into its rightful place behind me, a landscape of experience rather than a chain that bound me. My value, I realized, was no longer tethered to her approval or to the approval of those who had walked away. It was grounded in what I had built, in the life I had reconstructed from fragments of ambition, resilience, and patience. Meeting her eyes, I held my center, letting the moment exist without the drama it once might have carried, acknowledging her presence but not surrendering my peace. Later, as the morning unfolded into a soft, sunlit afternoon, I stood beside Kate in a small clearing framed by trees, the air crisp and carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. The gathering was minimal, intimate, a circle of the people whose support had mattered most, their quiet presence amplifying the significance of the day without fanfare. Each detail held weight, the light filtering through the leaves, the subtle breeze brushing skin, the muted sounds of nature interwoven with soft laughter, and the distant hum of life continuing beyond our circle. When I took Kate's hand, feeling the warmth and steadiness in her grip, I felt the culmination of everything I had endured, the tangible result of patience, perseverance, and trust. The ritual, simple and unadorned, held more power than any grand spectacle could. The small gestures, the deliberate attentiveness, and the quiet intimacy provided a clarity that resonated deeper than any fleeting triumph. As the ceremony concluded, I felt the lingering pulse of serenity settle into me, a quiet affirmation that the chaos of the past had no dominion over the present. The world felt aligned with the choices I had made, the paths I had taken, and the connections I had nurtured. In that moment, standing in the filtered light, I understood that peace was not the absence of hardship but the presence of acceptance. A conscious decision to honor what had been, embrace what remained, and move forward with intention. Every breath carried the weight of survival, reflection, and a deliberate joy in the ordinary and extraordinary alike. I had built a life defined not by the failings of others, not by loss or betrayal, but by my own capacity to choose, to endure, and to create a foundation strong enough for love, purpose, and quiet fulfillment. The world felt larger, calmer, and full of possibility, and I walked forward into it unshaken, whole, and finally at peace.